Okay, so we've done around 10 videos, I think. I think we've run up to around 4 hours of audit documentation, how to create a file, how to do your risk assessment, calculate materiality, tailor your work programs and everything, work on risks and controls, reportable items. So that's all in video 1 up until 10. In this final video, I would like to walk you through Constellation. And you might have seen it already in the video on risks, I think, and controls. The reason, the reason why we were looking for something like Constellation is that when you do the traditional documentation in all these documents, it's usually a table format. It's usually a grid. And although that has a lot of merit to it, we thought there must be a better way to visualize an audit engagement for you. The problem with the reports was if you want to do a good job, you actually have to read the FSA, the risk report, maybe a control design matrix all at once. So even if you have 2 monitors, it's big documents, and it's a lot of documents that you would actually want to see at the same time. So we felt like the traditional way of working with an audit engagement can use a bit of a refresh. We got some of our really smart people involved, and they came up with Constellation. And I think this is, well, I would say it's revolutionary. It's a new way to browse and navigate your audit engagement. So what do you see here in the screen right after you load Constellation? I can understand this is a bit busy. This is the demo file that we've been working on. First of all, the yellow items are financial statement areas. So what you can see here is my revenue is probably the largest balance. So the size of the bubble is related to the balance of my financial statement area revenue. Receivables is not that extensive. Inventory is kind of like similar. PP&E is a little bit smaller. So hopefully that right away gives you this impression of what are my most important, my most relevant financial statement areas. Then in red, you might already recognize that. Red we use to show risks. So you can see here, that's our salesman's bonus risk that we've been tracking throughout all these videos. PP&E value. And you might notice that there's a difference between larger bubbles and smaller ones. The larger ones are significant risks. The other ones are, well, regular, not significant risks. Then in blue we have controls. So you can see all the linkage between controls and risks. So these controls might actually mitigate that risk if they are effective, etc. The key controls again are shown a little bit bigger than the regular controls, so right away it attracts more attention from you as the person viewing. The little purple ones are the business cycles, and I think revenue is a nice example where you can see the business cycle really is the nucleus or the center around your risks, the center of your risks and controls, because this is all related to the business cycle revenue. Then here in green I have my reportable items. So this is one reportable item that's linked to this risk. And here in orange are my pervasive categories. So I think this right away tells you, hey, there are no risks linked to this pervasive category of my file. Is that correct or not? Now, when we were working with Constellation, we right away noticed that things tend to get a bit overwhelming. Well, and I think that's not strange when you try to merge like 5 or 6 big documents into one view. But in order to really be useful, we thought we needed filtering. So if I go to this part here of the file, I can see all the filters that I have at my disposal to really make sure that I focus on a specific part of my engagement file that I now want to check. For example, I can say, well, I don't want to see all my non-material financial statement areas. And just by clicking it, you can see those are hidden. I could also say, well, I don't want to see my pervasive categories. Or maybe when I'm still in the risk identification stage or earlier in my engagement, I can just hide the controls. Now all the settings that I'm making here in the filters will be kept when I do this soft refresh, and then the soft refresh will just reorganize your objects in a pleasant way, making sure that everything fits on the screen nicely. Now I'm running this demo in a smaller resolution. Usually when you have a modern computer you can go up to a higher resolution, which means you can even see more detail, or it doesn't have to be that small. With the filtering allows you to focus on specific areas. We actually also realize that there's a lot of filtering options, and maybe it would be better if we provide you with some predefined filters out of the box. So that's what we've added here into these menu items. We kind of call it use cases. And you can see that we've also followed the planning, risk assessment, risk response, the main stages of your audit. So we think that when you're doing your planning, you probably want to see something like this view, or this view would be the most relevant. So for example, let's take this one, business cycles. This is a business cycle centric view, and I'll get all the business cycles. But during the audit, we've been focusing on revenue, receivable, receipts. I can now go in and hide all my other business cycles as well. There we go. And that only gives me my business cycle revenue, receivable, receipts. So I'm just refreshing it to make sure everything is shown at the proper size here. Okay. And now I could actually go into a bit more detail. So let's say I want to see, I want to look at a risk here. No, that's not the one that we used here. My salesman's bonus risk. I can click that, and it would now show cards here at the right hand side of the screen. So cards are more details on the specific objects that I'm focusing on in Constellation. And you can see here for my salesman's bonus, the inherent risk is high, control risk is low, RMM is low. I can see the linked procedures here. And if I scroll a little bit further, I can see my linked FSAs, and I can also see my linked controls. And right away from these controls, I can tell whether they're key controls, whether they're effective or not. So this little icon here shows they're not effective, and this one shows it is effective. And if I wanted to, I can expand the details on a control or a financial statement area as well. Now, while we were doing this, we got the impression that first of all, we thought Constellation would be a way to view and navigate, kind of like a report. But as we were doing more with it, and for example, when you're using it to see if the risks that you have identified are linked to all the proper FSAs, hold on, let me just show you that while I'm doing that. So I can say, show me my links FSAs and don't show me my controls. So for example, now I could see I got all my risks here. Is this linkage correct? Or are some of these risks actually impacting more FSAs than only receivables? So for example, our salesman's bonus, I think that would also impact revenue, not only receivables. So we might be missing a link here. So as we were working with Constellation and we found more of those cases, we thought, okay, we need to give the user an option to go in and edit things right away. And that's what you can do using this little pencil. So I can just click it, zoom into all my risk details, and now make changes to my risk, create the linkage or link it to other controls, link it to other financial statement areas, etc. So with that, I think it becomes more and more a different way to really navigate and work in your audit engagement. I think I would definitely do it, but it's really up to you to see if this is the way, if this is a new way to really browse your engagement, to navigate with it. The initial feedback has been extremely positive, and we think that's just well, a whole new way, and we're really looking forward to hearing your feedback. Now, another little thing that I would like to show here is when you go, let's say we're going through a list of risks, and you do that in a grid, in a table, it's easy. You go from top to bottom. And when you're at the bottom, make sure you have dealt with all. But now that you have a more fluid, a more dynamic view, we found that it might be hard to make sure to track which risks have we looked at, which ones have we not yet looked at. So if I click on this one, I have this little tick here, and I could just select each risk and just tick it, sorry, wrong click, and just check it off. And this is not really a very important tick, but it's only like a little pencil saying, okay, I've checked this one, just as you're going through this view, making sure that you've addressed all the risks. So it won't be stored anywhere, and when I do a full refresh, you can see it is no longer there. So it's just while I'm in that view, I want to make sure that I've ticked and that I've seen all the risks, that I've made sure that I've addressed all of them. Okay, the other thing is that besides these predefined filters, you can of course also save your own filter. So I would really invite you to play around with these filters and to make sure that you build a view that really gives you enough value. And once you've done that, then you can click save. It will save that view, and you can even copy over that view from one engagement file to the other. And one thing in the filtering that I think is also quite important to know is these slider controls. So what you can do with this, for example, let me just hide the controls, report about it, pervasive categories, business cycles. Let's see if that's a bit clearer. Yes. So let's say, again, I go back to this. I want to make sure that the impact of my identified risks is documented properly. I can now go here and go to my FSA and say, only show me FSAs that have less than one associated risks. So right now this says between 0 and 3. So for example, my receivables here, that has 3 associated risks. If I now use this slider and slide it down, I can end up with 0, being these are all my FSAs that are not linked to any risks. So this is more a view where I can say, well, look at that revenue, and we got 3 or 4 risks, but none of them are impacting revenue. Is that proper documentation? I can even narrow it down and say again, like only show me my material financial statement areas. And I think this gives you a very clear view. And we've even noticed that while creating demo files, we now have to pay a lot more attention to making sure the demo file is consistent, because it right away, Constellation will show you, hey, there's a link missing here, or this is not connected to that. Is that documented in the right way? Finally, we think there are 2 other use cases. One is education of your staff. So if you want to show people how business cycles, FSAs, risks, controls all influence each other, I think Constellation can be a very useful tool as well. And finally, what we think can be a very good use case, and this was actually mentioned to us by one of our clients. They want to use Constellation to explain to their clients why a risk is relevant and why controls need to be in place. So I think it's also a good way to communicate to your client and actually say, well, this is what we do as accountants. This is why we have all those interviews with your key staff. This is why we check all those invoices and make sure controls are effective. Funny thing was that in a very recent presentation, I was actually meeting a couple of clients of accounting firms, and they came back with the same information. They said, wow, this is really interesting. Can we get a copy of this as well? Because we want to prepare this for the auditors. Once they come, we can show them here all the controls we have in place, so the auditors can do a more efficient audit. Okay, so I'm gonna hit refresh one more time just to, I always like to see those elements moving around. That is Constellation in a nutshell. I think it's extremely powerful. It might take some getting used to it, but we are really excited about this and really looking forward to getting your feedback and see if it really helps you perform an audit.